We have Mark Amaza. He's the Senior Communications Officer, Yiaga Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mark Amaza.
Good morning. Thank you for having
Good
me.
morning. It's a delight. Happy Independence Day and Happy New Month.
Same to you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us all the way from Abuja. The conversation we'll be having with you this morning is quite pertinent. We're celebrating our independence, and this also means our sovereignty. And one of the things that, we also look out for is how free we genuinely are. But we want to talk about the area of electioneering and elections in Nigeria. We know that this is a very sensitive topic, as this is the route through which any leader at all that's going to govern the nation at large needs to go through this process, because we run a democratic system of government. But let me ask you now, to start off, in the space of, with what Olumide said, 1993 elections has been tagged the freest and fairest elections so far in our history. But I'd like to get your perspective. How would you rate Nigeria's electioneering period over the years, if you were going to put it on a scale, and how exactly do you think we are doing in terms of electing our leaders as a nation?
All right. So I don't know from where you want me to take my timeline from, but let me say the reason why the 1993 elections are judged to be the freest and fairest was because of the option A4 system that was adopted then, which was an open balloting system. In other words, what we currently run is an open secret ballot. You vote to be open, but no one knows your choices. But the option A4, everyone can see who you vote for. Where you line up for the party you're supporting. And then there were only two parties, so it was logistically very easy to pull off or to operate. But since 99, we've had a lot of ups and downs. From 99, every election since 99 has been contested. But the peak of our election irregularities was in 2007,
Okay.
where even the winner of the election, late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, admitted that his election was flawed, and then got us started on the journey of electoral reforms. And that wasn't an easy decision he made, because even within his party, there was a lot of discontent regarding him admitting that it was a flawed election. But kudos to him, he did admit that, and then began that journey. And where we had the Justice Muhammad Uwais committee that stopped in 2008 to look at electoral reforms, and in some cases report in 2009, and made a lot of far-reaching recommendations for improving our elections. So since then, from 2011, we have been seeing a lot of improvements since the 2011. For example, when we talk about voter turnout, we are only able to quote numbers from 2011, because until then, what we had as voting was a lot of fabricated numbers, where you had persons, there was no biometric voter registration. People just all sort of people just print and vote. You had this situation in 2007 where we had funny names on the voter register, like Michael Jackson and Mike Tyson and whatnot.
Wow.
And if you do a forensic investigation of those votes, you'll see same thumbprints in multiple places. So there's been a lot of improvement in our electoral process. However, we are very far from the promised land regarding how where we can have elections that we look at and say, and even the losers will admit that yes, this election was fair and fair. In terms of not just in terms of the credibility of the elections, but also in inclusivity, in terms of how we increase access to the ballots. We still have a lot of challenges that we continue to grapple with.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Now, last year's 2023 general elections, before the election, INEC promised us a whole lot. They promised us technological innovations. Over 300 billion was earmarked for that particular election. But we saw what happened. So my question is, how can INEC, Independent National Electoral Commission, how can they balance technological innovation with concerns about electoral integrity and security? I mean, we also witnessed whereby the number of people who voted were higher than the number of accredited voters. How is that even possible? So how can INEC balance technological innovation with concerns about electoral integrity?
So the first thing is to note that technology is not a silver bullet, and the application of technology does not by itself make a great election or a perfect election. So one positive from the last election was that every person who voted must have to be accredited by the biometric voter accreditation system (BVAS), and that's because the law mandated it so. Prior to this, I mentioned the improvements from 2011, where we had introduction of smart card readers for biometric registration. However, because it was not mandated by law, you had situations where persons could bypass it, use incident forms, and then unfortunately in court, INEC was able to successfully argue that, and the court agreed with them that they were not mandated by law, even though it was in their guidelines. And unfortunately, I use the word unfortunately, our courts have a history of um, focusing exclusively on what is explicitly stated in the laws regarding elections and ignore what is in INEC guidelines. But however, we saw a feeling of technology when it came to the use of electronic transmission of results, especially in the presidential election, where the IRF failed, where there was a failure to transmit presidential election results. And again, INEC argued successfully that it was not mandated by law, which, while it was true, it is still a huge failing on their part because it's in their guidelines and they should be held to the guidelines that have put forward. So technology by itself is not a silver bullet. And it also shows us the gap in the law. So one of the recommendations we have at Yiaga Africa is to mandate electronic transmission of results. But beyond that, it's also to look at, you mentioned where cases where number of votes in certain polling units exceed number of accredited voters. The law is clear on that in such cases, the polling units the result from that polling unit should be cancelled, it should be nullified. However, we also have a situation where INEC, once results are collated and brought to it, they announce a winner and then leave it for those who are agreed parties to go and slug it out in court and challenge the results. But in that same Electoral Act, it also allows INEC, not mandate, allows INEC to have a 7-day window to review its election results. And that's a tool that has not been utilized by INEC at all. And that mechanism needs to be utilized, where INEC is able to review the results and exclude those polling units where you have such irregularities, such as overvoting. You also have on the BVAS, a technological it's a function that allows the BVAS to tabulate the results from a polling unit, and that tabulated results should be used for collation as well, with collated results also uploaded to the IRF, because doing that increases the transparency and accountability of election result collation process.
All right, thank you so much. As a 64-year-old, one would expect that there are certain traits and attributes that should be displayed. You see a 64-year-old man or woman, you don't expect them to be crawling, but you expect that they have made a very tangible progress in life. I want to connect this to our electoral process and electioneering system, right? One of the major issues we have: vote buying, electoral malpractice, voter apathy, because we see that people are losing the energy and the vibe, if I could use that word, to go out because they feel like their votes do not count. So I'd like to ask, because we take a cue from what happened in Edo State last weekend. We had a particular person who witnessed the incident calling to pour out his grievances, saying that was the last time he was ever going to go to the polls because his votes apparently do not count based on what he narrated that happened at the incidents. Now, I'd like to get your perspective. As a 64-year-old nation, over the years, we have struggled with vote buying, voter apathy, malpractice, violence in some elections, some polling units. How exactly, or what other strategies moving forward? We're preparing for Ondo elections, we're preparing for 2027 as well. What other strategies can we adopt to see a free, fair, and credible electoral system without, the large amount of voter apathy that we have right now amongst the electorate?
All right, so I'll take this question in 3 parts. First, while we're a 64-year-old nation, we've been in democracy only for a total of about 35 years.
Yeah.
In fact, the longest spell of unbroken democracy since 1999. And the military incursions into our governance or into politics over the years has had and still has far-reaching impact on our governance and our country. Because if we had, for example, we had never had a military coup, since 1960, we'll have continually improved our process and built a different kind of political culture. We have been unable to do that because of these constant interruptions of democracy. And I can give you a clear example. Here in our neighborhood in West Africa, Senegal has never had a military coup. They're the only country in West Africa that's never had a military coup. And they have been in democracy all through. And you can see how, even when recently the former president, Macky Sall, tried to elongate his tenure, the people rose and then and defeated that move by him. So that's one. That constant interruption has not been good for us in any way, and we continue to deal with the impact because there's built a sort of destructive kind of political culture, particularly in the years leading up to the Fourth Republic. To improve our elections is not going to be one thing. It's going to be a number of things. For one is that we still need to strengthen our electoral legal framework. There's a lot of gaps in our in the laws guiding our elections, from how persons into INEC are appointed to how parties nominate candidates to how the elections themselves are run. All of these gaps need to be plugged. And reforms are not one event. Yes, we have reformed the Electoral Act as recent as 2022. It does not mean that it's all done and we can go home and sleep. Electoral reforms is a continuous process, and each time is an election, we can look and see where were the gaps and what can be done better. But also is to insist on INEC and other parties implementing the current electoral law. Even though there are gaps notwithstanding, there's a lot more that can be done even with the current Electoral Act and Constitution. So we also need to insist that they implement that and follow the rules that currently exist. And then the last thing is we need to have a change in our political culture, especially our political class, which in my opinion are the greatest threat to our democracy, which ironically, they're still the biggest beneficiaries by the virtue of the positions they hold. The approach of our politicians to election is one of a win at all costs, do or die affair. And they continually look for ways to subvert our electoral process, to bypass the laws so that they can get power. And that culture needs to change. And I'll give you an example with rigging.
Okay.
A lot of times you hear political parties or politicians justify rigging as if we don't do it, the other side will do it. And that's the very essence of where you have a destructive sort of culture. That's rigging. For example, when you begin to think, oh, this has to be done. This is now part of the game, as they put it. So we need that political culture in Nigeria to change. Vote buying and voter apathy is, in my opinion, in our opinion, is an indication of where citizens feel first the elections are going. They feel when, like the person you mentioned calling from Edo to say he or he's never going to vote again, because many citizens believe elections do not reflect the results do not reflect the votes of the people. We do not see the reason why they should stress themselves to go out and stand under the rain and the sun to vote. You have situations where they are also worried about the safety of their lives. Would they be killed? Would they be harmed? That's one. Another thing is also the fact that many voters are unable to draw a straight line between the votes that they have cast, even if their preferred candidates win, and the quality of their lives. Okay. Has it improved over the span of 4 years? The biggest marketing tool for democracy is good governance. And the more that our politicians achieve good governance, we are able to have citizens have faith that elections do matter and can result in that outcome. And that's why you see more and more votes, politicians buying votes, because they are unable to, one, prove that they can deliver good governance or that they have delivered it if they're in office.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Now, in less than a minute, I don't know if you are able to answer this particular question. There has always been this question of who gets to appoint the head of the Independent National Electoral Commission. I know the executive does that, but there has always been debate that it should be taken off the hands of the executive. So my question now is to you, which is direct. Should the executive be the one to appoint the head of INEC? Or should it be left to the House of Assembly or National Assembly?
Neither of them should be the ones to appoint the heads of INEC or national officers of INEC. It should be an independent third party who should nominate the persons into INEC and before they undergo the legislative screening. Because a situation where the president and legislators are politicians belonging to political parties who are interested in outcome of elections to favor them, and they will always arise this question of bias. And we have seen that over the last 3 rounds of nominations, where we have had to cause to protest nomination of persons who are clearly partisan in the recent past or even at that time. So neither of them should be the ones to appoint persons to INEC. It should be by an independent third party.
Okay. You know, we're in a season of renewed hope. That has been the slogan right from the campaign period. But I would like to ask you, or I would like to tap your, I would like to just put it this way. A lot of Nigerians have lost their hope, but I'll connect it to elections because that's the focus right now. How would you, or what is that one advice that you would give to Nigerians right now that can, you know, stir that hope again and make them believe that, oh, my votes actually count. I actually can make a difference. This actually matters. I'm not going to give up. What's that word or encouragement, or how do I put it? I'm sure you get my question.
I do. So one is to say, staying away from elections does not improve our elections. In fact, they are more likely to get worse. So despite about how we feel about the state of governance in our country or elections in particular, we should still get involved. Still step out and vote. But beyond just voting, democracy works better when citizens are involved. And we need to be involved across the whole spectrum, as informed citizens, as organized citizens, as members of political parties, members of pressure groups, and as eventually as candidates. The whole spectrum is not, democracy is not something that is done to us. This is something that is done by us. So it's very important that we stay engaged, continue to participate, and not just vote and then believe that that's all we need to do.
Okay, I believe you're in Abuja at the moment. Just before you go, if you could, I know it's quite early. This is 7:52 a.m. But if you could bring us up to speed with how the independence celebration is going on in Abuja. I know that they had called for a calm celebration, but how is it like this morning in Abuja?
Well, like you said, it's still very early, so I can't say. I haven't stepped out of my house yet or followed the news, but let's see how it goes. Whether how people will celebrate it. So I'm not in a position to say yet, and I don't think anyone can yet either.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark Amaza. He is the Senior Communications Officer, Yiaga Africa. It's been a delight speaking with you this morning on assessing our electoral system in Nigeria, celebrating Nigeria at 64. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We hope to have you some other time.
Same here.
All right. All right.